Welcome to the Past in Pictures channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. Martin Luther King Jr. was at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis on April 3, 1968, one day before his death. The black and white photo shows his typical 1960s clothing, reflecting the atmosphere of the fight for African American civil rights during a decisive moment in United States history. The capture of American pilot John McCain by Vietnamese troops at Truc Bac Lake in Hanoi in 1967 marks a significant episode of the Vietnam War. This conflict highlighted global tensions and led to intense debates about military intervention, morality, and sovereignty on the international stage. During World War I, Manfred von Richthofen, known as the Red Baron, stood out as the top fighter ace with 80 confirmed victories in 1917, becoming a symbol of German forces and influencing aerial strategies in the global conflict. Military personnel from the 363rd Field Artillery Battalion during World War II posed near Okinawa on June 10, 1945. The campaign for the island chain was decisive in the Allied advance in the Pacific and marked the beginning of the decline of Japanese imperial power, influencing the outcome of that period. At an arid Russian airbase in 1944, Soviet and American pilots posed beside artifacts carrying messages intended for the German government, reflecting Allied cooperation in the fight against the Axis. This unity during World War II symbolized the importance of the alliance in defeating the regime of the time. French soldiers in a trench in Alsace-Lorraine on June 16, 1917, faced the harsh reality of World War I, a war that redefined borders and caused deep social transformations in France, marking a decisive moment in the country's military and political history. Families from South Vietnam, including parents and 5 children, moved quickly toward Saigon on the morning of June 19, 1972, as the tension of the period intensifies. This moment portrays residents' effort to leave the region amid the conflict that would change the country's future. Lydia Litviak, known as the White Lily of Stalingrad, was one of the most renowned Soviet female fighter pilots during World War II, shown in 1942 beside her Yak-1B. Her courage in the Battle of Stalingrad marked a decisive period in Soviet resistance. During the 1940s, the story of Grady Stiles Jr., known as Lobster Boy, reflects the difficulties faced by a family marked by a rare physical condition that continued across generations. His fame reveals both the impact of unusual genetic traits and the public interest in uncommon stories at the time, highlighting the social and medical issues of 1948. During World War II, the presence of the German embassy in Moscow in 1940 symbolized the complexity of diplomatic relations between Germany and the Soviet Union before their rupture, highlighting the strategic importance of the place amid the conflict and the growing tensions of the time. The photograph shows Joseph Goebbels, propaganda minister of the German government, during a time when the regime was rising in Germany, with signs in English or German in the background, symbolizing propaganda and political hostility. This image shows the manipulation tactics that marked the era, with a deep impact on world history. During World War II, giant octopus-shaped balloons, as part of a military training initiative in Tennessee, symbolized air defense strategies, standing out through the use of classic balloons that helped train teams and protect against aerial attacks. A convoy of T-34-85 armored vehicles advanced through a forest near Berlin in 1945, marking the end of World War II in Europe. This image reflects the Soviet victory, which contributed to the fall of the German government and shaped the continent's future. During the Battle of Britain over London in 1945, the scene captures an aerial projectile about to strike the city, symbolizing the final challenges of the conflict. The urban architecture and tense atmosphere reflect British resistance and the importance of this episode in weakening the German government during World War II. During the 19th century, Devices like the Kangwei in Shanghai represented forms of public exposure and punishment, reflecting social control practices in old China. Its use marked a strategy of discipline that lasted until legal modernization. In the late 19th century, the image captures a worker processing cattle, an essential activity for meat supply in the United States, reflecting the difficult working conditions of the time that drove regulations and transformed the food industry. Military personnel in old uniforms and helmets stand beside a war vehicle in an outdoor setting with trees in the background. The image, in soft and faded tones, suggests past military operations, possibly during a world war or similar conflict, showing the intensity of combat at the time. At the height of the 1950s, lingerie stood out for its elegance, with high cups, hook and loop fasteners, and visible metal closures, symbolizing the style of that era. This evolution strengthened cultural identity and influenced future trends in women's clothing around the world, marking a moment of innovation. A young Jesse James, a figure of the Old West, stood out as a controversial character tied to bank and train robberies in the mid-19th century. His story, marked by criminal acts, influenced the culture of an era and region considered frontier territory, with strong traditions of resistance and tension. An unusual incident involving a car and a submarine happened on August 19, 1961 in Sweden, a singular episode in the history of land and naval transportation. This incident highlighted the vulnerability of different forms of travel, marking a curious historical coincidence. The flood on the River Thames in 1928 caused the loss of 14 lives and left thousands homeless, marking one of the most serious episodes in England's history. The event highlighted urban vulnerability to extreme natural events, leading to improvements in flood management and coastal protection strategies. Salma Hayek in 1995 appears in fitted fashion, makeup and hair trends of the time, standing out for her talent and beauty in the film scene. The image conveys an era marked by the rise of Latin American artists on the international stage, strengthening her influence. Union and Confederate veterans, marking the 50th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg in 1913, exchange handshakes. The scene reflects the search for reconciliation after the American Civil War, whose importance lies in promoting unity and closing historical wounds. At the port of Ostend, a crowd watches a British airship cross the sky on August 7, 1914. The scene reflects the conflict beginning in World War I, marking the presence of aerial technology in combat and the change in warfare, influencing military strategies and the course of the 20th century. The construction of the Panama Canal, a monumental project completed in 1914, represented an engineering milestone that changed global trade routes and accelerated the connection between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. Its importance reflected technological advances and influenced world economic development. A 7th-century stone found in Scandinavia reveals one of the oldest representations of a Viking ritual associated with intense historical narratives. This carving helps explain the culture and practices attributed to Norse peoples whose actions marked European history. In a 19th-century setting, a miner's cabin reveals life in the Sierra Nevada in 1866, illustrating the effort of workers during the gold rush. Their clothing and the old structure portray the period when the search for wealth drove major economic and social transformation in the region. In the setting of a maternity hospital in the 1940s, a nurse in a typical uniform of the time stands beside a man in formal clothing, while old vehicles and vintage architecture show the period. The presence of the sign nursery reinforces the hospital environment, marking a phase that consolidated advances in maternal and childcare in Brazil. Simple lives unfold on a dirt street in Denver in 1875, with horse-drawn wagons, period clothing, and wooden buildings. This scene represents the early growth of the American West, marking the advance of animal-powered transportation and the formation of frontier communities in the 19th century. Pedestrians in traditional 19th century clothing watch steam elevated trains above the streets of the Bowery neighborhood in Manhattan around 1895. This transportation system reflected the city's rapid urbanization and industrial growth, marking an important phase in the history of urban transit. The figure of a chimney sweep with his helper, wearing period clothing and straw hats on a London street on May 7, 1877, shows the urban conditions of the time and the importance of manual labor in maintaining Victorian cities, reflecting its social impact. In rural Louisiana, young workers line up in a sugarcane field, wearing simple clothing beside a wooden shelter. This image reveals the harsh agricultural routine and the social impact of early labor in society. A 19th century indigenous camp shows a native woman near traditional tents, drying meat outdoors with ancestral techniques. This practice symbolizes the survival and autonomy of native communities in the face of social changes and cultural challenges. Dean Chenoweth, a hydroplane driver, survived a heavy impact in Seattle in 1979, an event marked by the old boat design and simple clothing of the time. This black and white image shows the challenges of water racing, which pushed advances in safety and the sport. In New York's cultural buzz, a llama appears in busy Times Square, a symbol of urban growth and social changes in the 1950s. This unusual scene shows transformations in the artistic scene and the influence of entertainment in the city, marking an era of innovation. A tiger trained by George Carcello, a famous animal trainer, shows its skill by playing a saxophone under watchful eyes in a zoo or circus setting with typical signage, evoking the atmosphere of 1925 performances that marked the history of entertainment and animal training. The progress in aviation in 1924 is marked by the flight of Raul Pescara's 16-blade helicopter, which set an endurance record of 13.8 seconds. This achievement highlighted the technological evolution of the 1920s, influencing the development of modern helicopters and showing progress in the aerial engineering of the time. The mission that marked May 14, 1973, highlights the launch of the Skylab satellite, an important symbol in American space history and technological progress during the 1970s. Under tropical vegetation, in an event that advanced scientific research, the rocket was launched in a setting of major impact on space exploration. Wernher von Braun, the engineer responsible for the United States space program and director of the Marshall Space Flight Center, stands out beside the monumental Saturn V rocket during preparations for the historic Apollo 11 mission, which took humans to the moon on July 20, 1969, a milestone in the space race and technological progress. The invention of the first email in 1971 marked a crucial advance in digital communication, allowing the exchange of electronic messages. This innovation, carried out by early technology researchers, transformed interactions and drove the development of networks like the Advanced Research Projects Agency Network, the precursor of the modern internet, which still influences society today. During 1956, International Business Machines engineers transported a 5-megabyte hard drive unit, a symbol of progress in data storage technology. The black and white photo portrays a moment of innovation, with period clothing, old vehicles, and wooden crates, marking a crucial phase in 20th century technological evolution. Howard G. Rogers, Polaroid's chief chemist, and colleagues with 5,000 bottles of chemical compounds in 1963 marked a breakthrough in photography because they discovered the color film process. This innovation affected visual culture by popularizing color photographs. At the International Radio Exhibition in Stuttgart, West Germany in 1965, a light-haired woman with a classic hairstyle looks at a new television with an integrated telephone, marking technological advances that reflected the impact of electronics on communication and leisure in the 1960s. In the 1960s, innovation in the auto industry brought vehicles with advanced technology, such as a portable television built into the dashboard, as shown by the 1965 model. These innovations reflected the growth of consumer electronics and changed the travel experience, marking an era of modernization. At the Greyhound bus terminal in Los Angeles, daily scenes reveal small screens and physical buttons on televisions from 1969. Along with the clothing and furniture of the time. Watching half an hour of television cost 25 cents, marking a moment of technological innovation and accessible consumption in the history of communication. At the height of the 1930s, transportation innovation was marked by the appearance of the car elevator in Chicago, impressive for its iron structure and modern architecture, making parking easier in tall buildings. This technology reflected urban and industrial advances essential to mobility at the time. Children practiced swimming techniques without water in 1922 because there was no pool. The image shows old swim trunks, writing on the wall, and an adult in a suit, reflecting the limits of access to physical education at the time, when sports were still seeking broader inclusion and social development. In the late 19th century, the introduction of classic exercise equipment, such as the multi-gym of 1892, reflected growing interest in health and well-being. Women wearing long dresses used these machines, marking an important phase in the evolution of physical habits in Western society, especially in the Victorian era. Crowning European monarchical history, 9 kings gathered in London at the funeral of Edward VII on May 20, 1910, marking the only moment when these monarchs posed together. The image reveals the solemnity of the time, highlighting the political and diplomatic importance of the event. The coronation of King Mahendra marked the consolidation of his power in the 1950s, a period of political transition in Nepal. His leadership until 1972 was marked by the establishment of the authoritarian Panchayat system, which shaped the country for decades, reflecting social changes and the strengthening of centralized rule. The flag that inspired the United States national anthem, shown in an old black and white photo, symbolizes the country's courage and freedom. This historical image shows the context of war and patriotism in the early 19th century, marking a crucial moment in American identity. The tool chest, created by craftsman H.O. Studley between 1890 and 1920, reveals a dark wood design typical of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Its importance lies in representing genuine craftsmanship from that period, highlighting manual skill and the durability of the materials used at the time, reflecting an era of handmade manufacturing. A team of painters climbed to the top of the Woolworth Building, a symbol of old New York skyscraper architecture in 1926. The effort shows concern for architectural details and safety in a city undergoing rapid economic expansion. A beauty in the 1930s shows styled hair under an electric hairdryer with an Art Deco design, a symbol of innovation in the era's beauty standards. Such devices marked progress in the cosmetics industry, reflecting the modernity and glamour of the period while influencing beauty and fashion trends. The 1937 Cadillac VI-16, a convertible-style car with a metal or fabric top, just before entering the automotive elite, represented the height of luxury and innovation in the decade, influencing high-end vehicle design and symbolizing the period of prosperity before World War II. While walking along a worn street in Moscow near the Moskva River, a child witnesses the contrast between Soviet buildings with classical architecture, leafless trees, and frozen ground, reflecting a period of intense cold and the urban changes of the Russian capital in modern times. Approximately at the beginning of fast food growth, a black and white image reveals a menu board with prices in cents and traditional logos from brands that would become world famous, such as McDonald's and Coca-Cola, showing the expansion of fast food concepts at the time, possibly in the 1950s. The opening of Central Park brought excitement to New Yorkers, with activities such as gondola rides on the lake and celebrations in a space that valued contact with nature. Designed to offer an urban refuge, the park became a symbol of leisure and culture in the city. In the early 20th century, a man in Washington, District of Columbia, handles a bicycle that works as a mailbox while exchanging mail. This scene portrays innovation in postal delivery in May 1912, reflecting advances in communication and transportation at the time. Men in formal clothing, hats, and wide pants work in the old New York postal station, where hanging lamps reveal furniture, papers, and mail, showing the importance of the postal service in early 20th century urban communication when the city was expanding its communication network. In the early 20th century, the St. John's Park Freight Terminal in New York reveals an era shaped by rail transportation, with carriages, smoke-emitting locomotives, arched architecture, and ornamental details. These images show the importance of land and maritime transportation during that period. In the context of 1947, a scene under a bridge in Detroit shows an old streetcar moving along tracks, showing urban transportation changing after the war. This image records the evolution of transportation and highlights Detroit's importance in the automotive and mobility history of the United States. During the advance of transportation in Russia, the arrival of the first taxi companies in St. Petersburg marked a significant change in urban mobility, reflecting modernization in the 19th century with motor vehicles on cobblestone streets and classical architecture. Yerevan, then in the Soviet Socialist Republic, saw the growth of its Zvartnots airport in 1982, a symbol of Soviet development in the region. This expansion reflected Yerevan's strategic importance in the Soviet era and the modernization of air travel in Armenia during that period. A police officer in an old uniform in a bar or tavern setting recalls the early 20th century when black and white photography captured historical moments. This image reinforces the importance of police forces in maintaining order and reveals customs of an era marked by tradition and toughness. A seated man in military training in the 1940s shows discomfort while holding a lock of hair, symbolizing the haircut process at the recruitment camp. This moment reveals the discipline and transformations involved in training soldiers during World War II. In the early 1940s, students protest against the ban on wearing slacks in schools, reflecting tensions over dress codes. The period photo shows young people with hairstyles typical of the decade and formal clothing, showing the social debate over authority and freedom in education in English-speaking countries. During the 1920s, the Belle Epoque gave way to the jazz era and flapper style, represented by modern young women who challenged social norms. In this 1924 photo in France, a girl in period clothing and short hair, typical of the time, appears surrounded by her cloth dolls, symbolizing the cultural energy of that period. Ava Gardner, a Hollywood diva in the 1940s, embodied glamour and elegance in her period photos. Her presence marked film history, influencing beauty and style standards reflected in long dresses, full curls, and controlled lighting that highlighted her sophistication. Joan Collins, in the 1955 production of the film Land of the Pharaohs, appears wearing period clothing in a black and white scene. Her presence on set reflected the glamour of classic cinema, marking the participation of an iconic actress in the film industry of the 1950s. In an outdoor setting, a woman in elegant clothing and a classic hairstyle attends a social event beside white tents and trees with an old car in the background. The caption indicates that it is Diana in the 1980s, marking a period of social and cultural prominence. The women's bowling team posed in front of a Chevrolet car in a San Francisco showroom in the 1940s. This photo reveals the style of the time, with classic clothing and traditional vehicles reflecting women's presence in sports. The image shows the social and cultural setting of that decade. Reflecting the elegance of traditional wedding ceremonies, a couple dressed in classic clothing marks a special moment of union. The formality of the suit and dress, combined with period decoration, reveals wedding traditions and customs in the early 20th century, highlighting the social importance of these events. Three sisters in old clothing, captured nearly a century ago, illustrate family daily life in the first half of the 20th century. The black and white photo reveals a period atmosphere with old-style furniture, long curtains, and a textured wall, reflecting domestic life in an era marked by social and technological change. The image portrays a moment of leisure on a winter morning around 1960, where a family enjoys the snow in winter clothing. This outdoor scene, with wooden fences and trees in the background, recalls memories of an era marked by black and white films that helped define the cinema culture of that period. In the 1920s, an adult helps two children learn to swim in a river, a symbol of the search for independence and leisure at that time. This image portrays the beginning of a broader spread of swimming lessons for children, marking advances in aquatic education and wellness culture. Train workers in the 1940s, wearing period clothing and metal helmets, work on an urban platform marked by signs in Portuguese and English. The impact of this public transportation revolution strengthened infrastructure modernization in major Brazilian cities, promoting greater connectivity. In the early 20th century, department workers take a lunch break, wearing long clothes with ruffled details and high collars, along with hats and scarves. The urban setting, with a brick wall and a domed structure, reflects the growth of cities during that period. A monument surrounded by leafless trees stands out in a Detroit snowstorm, with streets lit by old lanterns and historic commercial buildings in the background, showing the harsh winter weather and the architecture of the past century, reflecting urban resilience in intense cold. The image reveals the movement of residents watching urban changes, highlights the architecture of multi-story buildings and old vehicles, while period streetlights strengthened the atmosphere of New York in the 1930s, a time of major social and economic transformation in the country. In the 20th century, the 1950s were crucial for educational advances. Teachers in formal clothing and old calculators encouraged the study of mathematics, while the blackboard with equations reflected the focus on science and technology, a foundation for the country's modernization. The early 20th century records a photo of a 7-year-old boy, possibly young Babe Ruth, with curly hair, simple faded clothing, short pants, and leather shoes. The image, dated 1902, shows the beginning of a path that would transform American baseball. In 1921, in the context of the Russian food crisis, a powerful photo shows a boy in an extreme situation in Ukraine, a symbol of the social collapse experienced during that period. This record shows the devastating effects of the crisis that marked one of the most turbulent phases of Soviet history. The boy wearing a suit watches a tube television for the first time in an artificially lit outdoor setting, with buildings in the background and a readable sign on the screen. His surprised expression marked a moment of broadcasting technological news in the history of television in Brazil.